Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, let's jump in.
The empire had grown lazy under its own shadow. For 1,000 years it ruled the stars, thinking nothing could ever rise against it. It silenced rebellions before they began, wiped out threats before they grew teeth. And the one enemy they feared, humans, they believed were gone forever, extinct, erased, forgotten. Records said humanity died in fire, a war they couldn't win. A virus that spread too fast. Their cities turned to ash. Their ships became graves. Their name became a warning. Don't be like Earth. So the Empire moved on, took their old worlds, broke apart their ships for scrap, built monuments where resistance once stood, and no one spoke the word human anymore, not in schools, not in court, not even in fear. But far out, past the dead zones and shattered moons, something stirred. It began on a lonely planet known only as Virex 9. Cold, empty, buried in snow and silence. Empire miners had claimed it years ago, digging for core minerals. They found nothing but ice and bones. Until one day the ground trembled, not like a quake, not like collapse. It thumped, slow and steady like a heartbeat. Machines began failing, lights flickered, drill rigs collapsed. No one could explain it. Then, without warning, a signal blasted out of the mountain's base. Just one sound, a deep, broken hum that crashed every comms relay within 1,000 kilometers. No words, just force, like something ancient waking up angry. Empire Command dismissed it at first, a glitch, an echo of old tech. But then the message came again, louder, clearer. And this time, it spoke. We are not gone. The miners ran. The commanders panicked. But the signal didn't stop. It was spreading, riding through old satellite channels and long-dead relay lines, paths that hadn't carried messages in over 2 centuries. Something that should not have survived had just come back online. At the center of the storm, hidden under layers of frozen rock and Empire arrogance, a structure began to rise. Black metal, rough edges, human design. Not graceful like Empire tech, not elegant, but strong. Built to last. Built for war. And deep inside that tower, something human opened its eyes. The tower kept rising. It clawed its way from the frozen earth like a buried memory refusing to stay forgotten. Empire soldiers dressed in sleek silver armor stood frozen on the ridge above, their weapons shaking in their hands. They had no command, no plan. Nothing in their protocols prepared them for this. Lights flickered across the surface of the tower, pulsing in uneven patterns as if it were breathing. Machines long buried, long dead, were waking up, and the signal that had first whispered across the stars was now screaming. From orbit, Empire Commander Thalos watched the unfolding chaos on his ship's main display, his jaw tight, eyes narrowed. He'd served the Empire for over 4 decades. He'd watched rebellions collapse before they could draw breath. He'd watched worlds burn under Imperial command. But this made his blood run cold. "Sir," a young officer called out from the console, voice cracking. "The tower just accessed local sat-link networks, without interface." Thalos stepped closer, arms behind his back. "That's not possible." "I know, sir," the officer said, trembling, "but it's happening anyway." The screen glitched, static flooding the interface before it cleared and a new image appeared. A face, not alive, a recording, but undeniably human. A man with deep-set eyes and a scar down his cheek. The uniform was old, dusted with age, the fabric marked with the crest of an empire that no longer existed. His voice came through ragged, metallic, like it had traveled through centuries. "If you are seeing this," the man said, "then you've stepped where you were never meant to stand." The bridge fell silent. "You took our planets, you scrapped our ships, you turned our graves into mines, and you thought we wouldn't remember. But memory is what we're made of. You cannot erase it. You cannot overwrite it. And now you will face it. The image vanished. The signal cut. For a long time, no one moved. Then Commander Thalos spoke, voice low, grim. "Contact High Command. Inform them the tower is active and it's human." "But sir," the officer whispered, "humans are extinct." Thalos didn't answer, because deep inside he wasn't so sure anymore. On the surface, the Empire forces were already beginning to fall apart. The tremors were growing stronger, coming in slow, rhythmic waves. Every vibration was precise, not random, not natural. It was like the heartbeat of a giant machine coming back online. Drones lost flight. Targeting systems spun wildly. Old mining machinery sparked and collapsed. The Empire's technology, smooth, efficient, pristine, was being drowned in a rising tide of something ancient and angry. And then, from deep within the tower's base, something massive began to move. Not metal, not weapon, a ship. Half buried under the frozen rock, its hull broken, wings shattered, but alive. It rose slowly like a beast rising from a deep sleep, shedding ice and silence with every groan of its awakening frame. Human-made, covered in symbols no one could read anymore. And on its side, just one word in old Earth standard still visible through the frost. Exodus. High above on a hidden relay satellite, the message continued to spread, jumping from one forgotten system to another. It didn't need help. It moved on its own, like it knew where to go. And everywhere it went, it left behind a single phrase: "We are not extinct." In the capital world of the Empire, a storm was already gathering. At the top of the silver spires inside the High Senate's chamber, panic whispered through the cold marble walls. Holographic faces blinked into existence, senators, warlords, science primes, all speaking over one another. What if it's just a leftover signal? A trap? An ancient echo? Number it's coordinated. Look at the pattern. Look at the trajectory. Do you understand what this means? It means humanity didn't die. It waited. That sentence cut through the noise like a blade. The Supreme Minister, a woman with eyes like glass and hands that had never known war, finally spoke. "What happens?" she asked quietly. "If they're back?" No one answered, because everyone in that chamber knew what humans were. Not diplomats, not conquerors, but survivors. Builders of machines that outlived them. Makers of weapons that didn't need commands to fire. Soldiers that didn't surrender even when their world fell into dust. If the Exodus warship had truly awakened, if that signal was spreading, then the Empire was standing on the edge of something it could not control. Because the Empire wasn't prepared for war, it was prepared for order, and humans were the opposite of order. Back on Virex 9, the soldiers surrounding the tower had begun to fall back. Their orders were unclear. Their communications scrambled. They called for evac ships, but something in the sky was jamming their signals. Above them, the clouds had darkened, not with weather, with static. The kind that crackled on skin and made your teeth ache. Something old. Something angry. Inside the tower, lights flickered across walls untouched by time. Screens blinked on, weapon ports slid open, and a voice, female this time, spoke through the tower's comms in an old Earth tongue. "System restart complete. War state confirmed. Foreign entities detected. Defense protocols engaged." Turrets unfolded from the tower's sides, and for the first time in centuries, human weapons came alive, not to protect, but to punish. From the darkness beneath the Exodus warship's main bay, cryo chambers began to hum. One by one, red lights turned green. One by one, the last of the hidden were waking. Some were soldiers, some were engineers, some were something else entirely. But all of them had one thing in common. They remembered. The plague may have taken Earth, The silence may have buried their names, but their mission, what they were built for, never faded. They weren't survivors, they were retribution. The Exodus roared, not with sound but with presence. As it clawed its way from the frozen soil, the very air around it seemed to ripple. The snow that had blanketed it for centuries melted in seconds, revealing hull plates scorched from ancient battles. The ship's silhouette was jagged, brutal, unlike the smooth curves of Empire warcraft. It looked like something forged from rage, a warhammer cast into space. The Empire had forgotten human design, intentionally. History books painted human ships as primitive, bulky, inefficient. But what hovered now in the icy wind didn't look inefficient. It looked indestructible. Commander Thalos watched from orbit, his jaw clenched so tightly his teeth ached. On the screen in front of him, the Exodus hovered in the air just above the surface, its engines glowing dull red as if still waking from a nightmare. "Life signs?" he demanded. "No clear read," the sensor tech responded. "Too much interference. Their systems, they're not broadcasting in any recognizable format. We can't tap in." "Then send a drone down there now." The tech nodded and launched a recon unit. The small probe dropped from the underbelly of Thalos's cruiser, zipping through the upper atmosphere like a bullet. It passed through the dark clouds and skimmed over the tower, scanning for threats. It didn't make it halfway to the ship. With no warning, a thin beam of white light lanced out from under the Exodus. The drone disintegrated mid-air. No explosion, no debris. Just gone. The bridge fell silent. "Did they even lock on?" Thalos asked. "No, sir, no tracking signature, no energy buildup. It just fired." "They're awake," Thalos muttered, stepping closer to the display. "And they're watching us." Inside the Exodus, the lights came on slowly. Not all at once, like a city returning power grid by grid, one hallway at a time, one deck at a time. It didn't hum with life. It growled. The systems groaned as coolant rushed through long, dry veins. Hydraulics hissed behind armored panels. Massive servos turned, stretching after centuries of stillness. The core reactor wasn't fully online. Not yet, but it didn't need to be. The Exodus had been built for last stands and hopeless odds. It could fight half dead and still win. At the center of the ship, the bridge unlocked itself. The old steel door slid aside with a screech of rust and pressure. Inside, it was dark. Dust clung to the walls. Frozen condensation webbed across control panels, and in the center, a single cryopod hissed open. Steam poured out. The figure inside coughed, gasped, and then rolled sideways onto the cold floor. Captain Salas Mar hit the deck like a man falling through time. His lungs burned, his skin felt raw. Muscles cramped as his body rebooted after who knew how long in stasis. But his mind was awake the second his boots touched metal. He staggered to his feet, grabbing the edge of a console for support. "Ship," he croaked. "Report." For a moment, nothing. Then a voice answered, calm, cold, familiar. "Exodus online. Systems critical. Crew status, 0 confirmed survivors. Reactor 42%, primary weapons dormant, secondary defense active." Salas closed his eyes for a moment. The names of his crew flashed in his mind. Friends, soldiers, people who had gone into cryo with him when the signal had come. The signal that said Earth had fallen. Now they were gone, and he was alone. But he wasn't surprised. He limped toward the main command chair and fell into it. Lights blinked to life all around him as his biometrics synced with the ship. The Exodus recognized him. It remembered him. It had waited for him. "Why am I awake?" he whispered. "Distress beacon detected. Human encryption. Source, Virex 9. He blinked hard. "That's not a human colony." "It is now." Salas stared at the main screen as the ship brought up planetary data. A massive black tower, An Empire strike force, a battle already brewing. His instincts screamed. A trap, a relic, or something worse? He didn't know. But one thing was certain. They were calling him. Outside, Empire forces had begun to regroup, forming lines a safe distance from the tower. They had no orders to engage, not yet. Thalos's ship held position in high orbit, waiting for further instruction from high command. But on the ground, soldiers whispered. They had heard the tower's voice. They had seen the ship rise. And now, some of them were afraid. Why would humans leave something like that buried? One trooper asked, checking his plasma rifle for the third time. Why build something so far out, so cold, so dead? Another trooper spat. Because they were planning to come back. They always do. A third looked up at the hovering black hull of the Exodus and said nothing. He'd fought pirates, rebels, border skirmishes, but this felt different. This wasn't resistance. This wasn't rebellion. This was vengeance. Inside the Empire's central command relay, far from the front line, alarms flared. Not from Virex 9, from elsewhere. The beacon that had awakened the Exodus had not stopped spreading. It had touched other systems the Empire hadn't monitored in years. Dead zones, ghost worlds, places listed in records as non-essential. Now those records were lighting up with red alerts. Old Terran colonies, scrapped ships, abandoned bunkers, all of them blinking the same signal. We are not gone. Captain Solace sat silently on the Exodus bridge as the ship finished its checks. Every piece of data told him what he already knew. The Empire had grown fat off the bones of his people. The galaxy had forgotten what humanity was capable of. He reached toward the navigation console and keyed in a manual override. If he was the first to wake, he would be the first to act. Ship, he said, bring up all records of known cryovaults, every warship, every failsafe site. I want to know where the rest of us are sleeping. Confirmed. Compiling. He leaned back and looked at the stars. The Empire thought humanity was scattered, broken, gone. But Solace Mar had always known better. Because they weren't buried, they were planted, and now the harvest was beginning. Across the galaxy, panic traveled faster than light. The signal from Virex 9 had reached places no official transmission could. It danced through the static veins of long-abandoned relay stations, bounced off dead satellites, and reactivated forgotten networks. Entire systems that had been dark for centuries now lit up with red beacons and 3 words spoken in a voice too human to ignore. We are not gone. Inside the Galactic Council Citadel, a towering spire of glass and gravity anchored to the core world of Virelian Prime, chaos had taken root. Ambassadors argued, military officials paced, analysts screamed into fractured data feeds while translators struggled to decode the ghost language that had returned after 2 centuries of silence. The humans were supposed to be extinct. Every empire had signed the records. The last images of Earth showed its surface boiling, cities lost in plague fire, and Terran ships breaking apart in orbit like glass under pressure. There were no survivors. At least, that's what they had believed. Now a human warship had awakened, a tower with human code had come alive, and the stars themselves were whispering their name again. The council's chambers were packed, each delegate projected in shimmering light above their seat. Species from across the galaxy sat in various forms, scaled, feathered, silicon-skinned, eyeless, multi-limbed. But each shared the same expression: unease. High Archon Vel of the Yasari Confederacy, a creature of liquid limbs and whispering speech, addressed the room with an edge not heard in a generation. 200 years of peace, Vel hissed, because we believed the threat had passed. And now we find it has been sleeping beneath our feet. The Ouvrier Empress, Thalia of the Stone Throne, her voice calm but ice-laced, leaned forward. Peace bought with silence. We assumed extinction was permanent. We never verified. Because there was nothing to verify, growled Drekvarn, warlord of the Dominion. His teeth were yellow stone, sharpened by tradition. Earth fell. We saw the last battle. The plague burned them out. What remains are echoes, code, and metal, nothing more. You're wrong, came a new voice. The chamber shifted as a central screen activated. The face that appeared was unmistakably human. Not young, weathered, battle-hardened. A scar ran down his left brow just above an eye that had clearly been replaced with tech. He stood in what looked like the ruins of an outpost, gunfire flickering behind him, smoke curling up from broken ground. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't ask for permission to speak. I don't care if you're scared, he said, voice low and even. I don't care if you think this is a threat. You're right. It is. Someone in the chamber whispered, Is that a live feed? The man nodded once. My name is Captain Solace Mar of the Terran Exodus Fleet. This is not a request. This is not diplomacy. This is the truth. We remember what you did. We remember the silence when Earth fell, the way your fleet stood back and watched our skies burn. We remember your treaties, your celebrations. He stepped aside, revealing the broken husk of an Empire base, symbols burned away, human tech torn from the walls. But more than anything, he said, we remember how you forgot us. Then the feed cut. Silence fell, a long, shaking silence. And then chaos erupted. Impossible! That broadcast was untraceable. He's lying. He has to be. Shut up! High Archon Vel's voice boomed across the chamber like a wave crashing into stone. That man's voice activated 6 dormant human networks across 6 different systems. That wasn't performance. That was protocol. Then it's begun, Thalia said quietly. The fire. Somewhere deep within Empire space, far from the polished corridors of the Council, another message reached someone very different. On the edge of the old war fronts, buried inside a prison colony known only by its system code, Delta 71K, an old man opened his eyes. He had been forgotten, his name erased from records, his body scarred and rebuilt by years of hard labor under artificial gravity. But when he heard the signal, when those 3 words played through the old wall radio he'd spent years repairing in secret, he stood. He wasn't a prisoner anymore. He was a soldier. The guards tried to stop him. They didn't live long. All across the galaxy, others like him were waking, old commanders hiding under false names, deserted colonies rising in a chorus of vengeance, kids raised on rumors discovering caches of Terran tech buried beneath their homes. The Empire had thought killing Earth would end humanity. They had never understood. Humans didn't survive because they were the strongest. They survived because they never let go. Back aboard the Exodus, Captain Solace Mar stood before the main navigation array. The star maps were old, marked with pre-collapse coordinates, but slowly updating as the ship reconnected to old Terran relays blinking back to life. Dozens of systems lit up, some with only static, others with signals. Encrypted, weak but familiar. Terran encryption, and they were waking up. Status of the nearest relay? He asked. Beacon Station Sigma 14B, orbiting dead world in the Vanek cluster. Signal weak but present. Chart a jump, Solace ordered. Caution. Reactor stability at 42%. Long-range jump may result in hull stress or blackout. He placed his hand against the console, the cold steel humming under his palm. I didn't come back to play it safe. Prep the jump. The ship rumbled around him. Panels flickered as power was rerouted. Deep in its core, the ancient warp drive stirred. technology that hadn't been used in centuries but had waited faithfully like a sleeping beast. The Exodus was no longer a secret, it was a message, and soon it would be a weapon. Back in council space, an emergency session was called. Again. This time, fewer voices argued, because there was nothing left to debate. The humans weren't gone, and now they were moving. The Empire's last hope of containing the truth that the ghosts of Earth had risen was already slipping from their grasp. And this time, the war wouldn't wait for their permission. The jump was rough. The Exodus had not stretched its limbs in over 2 centuries, and the strain showed. Lights dimmed, bulkheads groaned. The ship's core shuddered as its slipstream drives tore a path through dead space. Alarms flickered and died just as quickly, overridden by ancient subroutines that remembered how to operate even when their creators had long since turned to dust. Captain Solis Mar stood firm in the command chair, hands clenched tight around the armrests. His eyes locked on the forward screen, teeth gritted as the jump finally ended with a sudden lurch. Outside, the stars bent back into place, and before them hung the ruins of another forgotten world, Sigma 14b, a graveyard moon orbiting the blackened shell of a gas giant. Once long ago, this had been a forward command relay. It had connected Terran battle fleets, colonies, and mobile refueling posts. Now it was just a frozen lump of metal and silence drifting through a lightless orbit. But it was not dead. The Exodus sensors pinged before they even finished stabilizing. A signal, weak, flickering, but undeniably Terran. A beacon repeating on a classified war frequency, Black Line Omega. A code used only when the mission was considered impossible, or when no one else was expected to return. Solis rose from his seat, face expressionless. "Bring us in close," he ordered. "I want a visual scan of the relay core." The ship complied, angling itself gently toward the drifting station. As the camera feeds resolved, the relay came into focus, its metal skin cracked, solar wings torn from impact, communications dishes twisted like paper under wind. But embedded deep within its heart was a sealed vault, covered in burn marks and reinforced plating. That vault was Terran, and it was intact. "Send the handshake protocol," Solis said. The AI hesitated. "Warning, code class legacy. Decryption may trigger dormant defense routines." "Send it anyway." A moment passed, then 2. Then the screen blinked. Authorization confirmed. Project code. Wraith 3. Access granted. The vault's outer doors hissed open. Inside, lights came on, faint and flickering like the last breath of a campfire. And from the darkness, a signal emerged. Another ship. Solis stepped forward. "ID, TSS Tempest, Class Ghost Frigate. Designation Black Recon. Mission status classified. Crew status unknown. Location? Docked within the relay hangar. Minimal power signature. Cold storage engaged." Solis' heart beat faster. Another ship. Another survivor, maybe. He turned to the nearest comms node. "Prep a boarding team. Full armor. Keep weapons on stun. If there are any cryo survivors, I want them alive. If it's just the AI, I want it talking." The Exodus began transmitting docking instructions. Heavy clamps extended from the old warship and latched onto the relay station with a bone-shaking thud. Boarding corridors extended like limbs. Lights followed their length, waking one panel at a time. Solis led the team himself. No one else knew what to expect inside a ghost frigate. The air inside the relay station was stale and cold but breathable. The smell of rust and old oil filled the corridors. Frost curled over the walls. The place hadn't been touched in over 100 years. As they moved deeper into the hangar bay, the Tempest revealed itself. It was smaller than the Exodus, but no less deadly. Its hull was covered in ceramic armor, cracked in places but still whole. Its engines had once been modified for long-range stealth, still cold now but humming faintly like it knew someone was coming. They stepped aboard. The airlock hissed. Systems lit up cautiously, like an old warrior blinking open one eye. "AI status?" Solace called out. There was a pause, then a voice answered, female, calm, measured. "Ghost Frigate Tempest. Status, dormant, waking sequence initiated. Identity confirmed. Captain Solace Mar. Welcome aboard." "Crew manifest," Solace said, scanning the dusty bridge. "Cryopods. 8. Status, 2 viable, 3 failed, 3 unknown. Bring them online. Caution, revival process is unstable. Pods are degraded." "I don't care. Wake them." Within minutes, steam poured into the cryo chamber. Solace stood with his team as the first pod clicked open. The woman inside gasped, choking on cold air. Her body trembled as she sat up, eyes blinking against the sudden light. Her hair was short, her skin pale from decades of sleep. She looked around wildly, confused, until her eyes found Solace, and she smiled. "Sir, thought we missed the war." Solace knelt beside her, helping her sit upright. "It's just getting started." The second pod opened. This time a tall man staggered out, coughing hard, clutching his side, but he was alive, still breathing, still here. They were waking, one by one, and they remembered. By the time they returned to the Exodus, the 2 revived crew members had begun recounting everything they could remember. Their last orders, their mission logs, what happened before they entered stasis. The Tempest had been part of a covert recon squadron sent to monitor the Council's inner systems after the fall of Earth. Not to fight, not to survive, just to watch and wait. Their last transmission had never gone out. They had been forgotten. Until now, Solace stood alone on the Exodus bridge once more, staring at the newly updated map. The relay had pinged more than just the Tempest. Its final act before going dark had been to transmit one last data burst, coordinates of other ghost fleets, some confirmed, others only rumors. He stared at the blinking red points on the map, each one a possible warship, each one a promise. The Council thought they were reacting to a single tower, a single ship. They had no idea. The Exodus powered its engines once more as if it too was eager. The hunt had begun, and Captain Solace Mar would find every last Terran warship still left in the dark. Because the galaxy had forgotten what it meant to fear Earth's fleets. Now, they would remember. "Let me know when you're ready for the 4th topic. Resistance spreads as more Terrans awaken." "Fortune," you said, "continue from where you stopped. Write in depth and long 1,000 words and do not end the story so that you can continue later." ChatGPT said, "Certainly. Here is the 4th topic. Resistance spreads as more Terrans awaken, continuing seamlessly from the last line. This section builds on the momentum of the warship awakenings as resistance starts spreading across the stars." Still in cinematic, detailed storytelling mode, the map was no longer silent. When Solace had first accessed the Exodus long-range network, the galactic map had shown only one red marker, the tower on Virex 9. Now, over a dozen new signals pulsed like blood in a beating heart. Some faint, some distorted, but all unmistakably Terran. Each light marked a place forgotten by the Empire, discarded by the Council. Abandoned colonies, shattered space stations, remote moons with no strategic value. They had been overlooked because they were considered dead. And in doing so, the enemy had made their worst mistake. They had mistaken silence for surrender. Solace stood at the forward viewing platform, watching the signals spread. The faint blue glow from the Exodus systems bathed his armor in dim light. Behind him, the Tempest's surviving crew sat quietly, absorbing the moment, eyes locked on the ever-growing constellation of beacons. A young officer, barely older than 20, stared at the map like she was seeing her past come back from the grave. "They're waking up," she whispered. "We're not alone." "No," Solace said, "we never were." Word traveled faster than the council could contain it. The signal, "We are not gone," had already been decrypted and rebroadcast by hundreds of relay stations, some human-built, some scavenged by sympathetic factions. Even systems once thought loyal to the Empire had started echoing the phrase. It was more than a warning. It was a call. In the mining tunnels of Orinth 5, a boy no older than 12 crawled through a ventilation shaft, dragging with him a dusty, half-working radio his father had hidden. He twisted the dial, cracked through layers of static, and found it. The signal. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the voice, the tone. He ran back to his family, shouting, "We're not the last, they're back!" On the scorched moonfields of Ravalon, once home to a forgotten Terran outpost, the dust gave way as a hatch cracked open from beneath the surface. A cryo-vault, one of hundreds buried deep underground, released its seal. Two figures stepped out, blinking against the dying light of a sun they didn't recognize. Their uniforms were faded, their weapons old. But their minds were sharp, and their memories sharper. They saw the stars, and they heard the signal. Inside the Council's citadel, panic turned to paranoia. Emergency meetings became daily rituals. Surveillance fleets were dispatched to every known Terran ruin. Propaganda networks were activated. On every screen, the message was the same: containment, isolation, peacekeeping. The Council didn't dare call it what it was: fear. Across border worlds, Imperial soldiers raided towns looking for anyone with Terran blood. Communications were monitored, travel restricted, but they couldn't stop the infection of memory. On Delta Reach Station, an aging scavenger with a cybernetic arm gathered a dozen ex-miners around a fire made from stripped conduit. He pulled a battered data chip from his coat and slotted it into an old projector. The message played. Solace Mar's face, his voice, the words, "We remember." The old man stood, voice hoarse. "You all said I was mad for keeping this, for waiting, but I told you they'd come back." Someone in the crowd, a former technician from a refueling ship, whispered, "What do we do now?" The old man's smile was slow, terrible, satisfied. "We fight." Back aboard the Exodus, the ship's AI interrupted the silence. "Incoming message. Origin Velka outpost. Human code. Secure channel." Solace turned. "Patch it through." The screen flickered, lines of static dancing before stabilizing into a shaky, low-res image. A woman stared back. Older. Scar running down one side of her face. Her uniform was patched together from salvage, but the emblem on her shoulder was unmistakable. The Terran orbital shield. "Name's Commander Ray Sulin," she said, her voice low and grim. "Didn't think anyone else made it." "We did," Solace said. "Where are you transmitting from?" "Outer Rim Colony, Velka Outpost. We've got about 30 ex-defense corps here. Some engineers, some old mechs. We've been quiet since Earth fell. But now..." She nodded towards something off-screen. Solace heard it before he saw it. The low hum of machinery spinning up. "We cracked open one of the old fusion cores, brought 2 dropships back online. We can fight again." Solace smiled, just barely. "Then hold position, more are coming." The Empire responded the only way it knew how: burning worlds. Strike fleets were dispatched to the coordinates of known Terran signals. The orders were clear: no prisoners, no recovery, total incineration. Colonies suspected of harboring humans were wiped from orbit. The Council justified it under the banner of preservation. But everyone knew what it really was: desperation. But for every colony that burned, 2 more sent signals. For every cryovault destroyed, 3 more activated, and for every human killed, 100 more remembered. The Exodus and Tempest now flew together, old warships bound not by command but by purpose. Their next destination was the HFY system, where another ghost had lit its beacon. Solace watched the nav feed as the ships aligned. He didn't speak much anymore. He didn't have to. The resistance wasn't just alive. It was spreading like wildfire through a field the Empire thought was ash. Uncontrollable, uncontainable. Some of the colonies weren't waiting for contact. They were striking first. On the icy world of Zera K, a group of Terran engineers hijacked a planetary drill rig and launched it directly into an orbital Empire outpost, cracking it open like a shell. On Rendaxa's moons, 6 cryo-soldiers, barely armed, ambushed and captured an Empire command vehicle using nothing but tactics and terrain. And on the outskirts of the Forsen Belt, a group of Terran-born orphaned, no more than teenagers, overrode an old relay station and rebroadcast the Resistance's signal across 7 systems. These were not soldiers. They were memory wrapped in flesh. In the private quarters of the Exodus, Solace stared at an old photograph. 4 faces, his old squad, brothers, sisters, all gone now. He touched the glass gently, then turned away. There would be time to mourn later. Right now, the stars were calling. His comm unit buzzed. Captain, long-range scan has detected a Titan-class warship signature. Estimated 3.4 light-years. Partial activation confirmed. Solace didn't need to ask which ship. There was only one Titan that hadn't been confirmed lost or destroyed. The Vigilant. He closed his eyes. Another ghost was waking. Chart a course, he said. The war was just beginning. The Exodus and Tempest arrived in the Mardak sector under a veil of silence. No messages sent. No signals broadcast. They dropped out of slipspace just beyond the orbit of a fractured red moon, the system's only natural satellite now torn open like a wound. It had once been a mining site, then a prison world, and now, according to the final beacon, a Terran bastion. The Vigilant was here, the last of the Titan-class warships, and a legend from the fall. She didn't shine. She didn't hum. She loomed. Over 3 kilometers of obsidian black steel, her hull plated with the scars of battles no one remembered anymore. Her engines burned red like dying suns. And she hovered above the broken moon like judgment given form. Solace Mar stood on the bridge of the Exodus, eyes fixed on the screen. "She's been awake longer than we thought," he murmured. "Confirmed," replied the AI. "Reactor levels at 68%. Defensive systems online. Life signs detected. 133 cryopods active. Partial crew command restored." And then came the voice, gravel-throated, deep as the void, familiar in a way that hit Solace harder than he expected. "This is Captain Mara Trask of the Vigilant. Terran Defense Command. Identification confirmed." "Solace Mar, you old bastard. Took you long enough." Solace exhaled, surprised to feel something like a laugh rise in his throat. "Thought you were dead." "Got better," she replied. But they weren't the only ones arriving. From the far edge of the system, 6 Imperial cruisers dropped out of warp in formation. Not scouts, not recon, executioners. Each ship bore the mark of the Council's Special Clearance Division, the black sun sigil painted across hulls still wet with the blood of rebel systems they didn't hail. They didn't scan. They powered weapons and advanced. On the Vigilant, Mara's voice sharpened. "They're not wasting time." Solace's eyes hardened. "And neither are we." The battle began before the first order was given. The Tempest, smallest of the 3, darted between asteroid belts, laying down cover fire with its twin railguns, drawing attention like a mosquito buzzing a sleeping beast. The Empire took the bait. 3 cruisers broke formation and chased her. But that was the plan. As they pursued the Tempest, the Exodus fired, not at the ships, but at the debris field. Ancient mining charges, long thought dead, exploded to life as the ship's cannons detonated them. The resulting shockwave cracked one cruiser in half. The others tumbled, struggling to reorient. Then came the Vigilant. She moved like a god, slow, deliberate, irresistible. Her main cannon, the Heavens Divide, roared to life, a pulse beam that had once melted a war moon during the siege of Almaris. The lead Imperial command ship had just enough time to begin evasive maneuvers before it was erased in a column of white-hot light. From the bridge of the Exodus, Solace watched the carnage unfold with grim focus. They didn't fight to win. They fought to show the galaxy that the dead didn't beg for mercy. The Empire responded as expected, violently. A full retaliation fleet arrived within the hour. 20 warships, including dreadnoughts and carrier-class vessels. They swarmed into the system like hornets kicked from the hive. They thought it would be overkill. They thought 3 relics wouldn't hold. They didn't understand that humans built things to endure. Inside the Vigilant, Captain Trask coordinated strikes with terrifying precision. Her crew, thawed just hours before, moved like they'd never slept. On the Tempest, Ray Sulin led a boarding party onto a crippled enemy cruiser, hijacking it mid-fight and turning its weapons against its own fleet. On the Exodus, Solace prepared the final move. The Exodus didn't carry a god strike. It wasn't a Titan, but it did carry a relic, something older, more terrible. Deep in the ship's vault, locked behind 8 layers of biometric seals, sat a device called the Judgment Core, a prototype bomb from the early years of the collapse, banned even by Terran standards. It was not meant for sieges. It was meant for extinction. It had one purpose: remind the galaxy what it meant to provoke Earth. Solace stood before it in silence. We said we'd never use it. The AI's voice was soft. The Council broke more promises than we ever did. He keyed in the sequence. The countdown began. They fired it into the heart of the Imperial formation, not toward ships, toward their arrogance. The detonation wasn't light, it wasn't sound, it was memory, a pulse of time-locked energy, a singularity of human vengeance, bloomed in space and swallowed the fleet whole. Ships buckled inward, crews screamed through collapsing hulls, and then all was silent. The Judgment Core didn't destroy, it erased. When it was done, there was only quiet. Back on the bridge, Solace sat in the command chair. His body was tired, his heart heavier than he cared to admit. But he watched the screen as signals began to pour in from across the system. Terran ships, Terran voices, Terran flags. One by one, war relics came online. The Resolute, the Valor, the Endless Flame. Even the old black box freighters, long thought lost, blinked back to life and sent one message across every open channel. We are not gone. We are not afraid. We are not finished. In the council chamber, the panic could no longer be contained. Systems were breaking away, old allies were defecting, border empires were surrendering before they were attacked. And the word spreading through every world, every moon, every station was no longer fear, it was remembrance of Earth, of fire, of humans who didn't die when they were defeated, only when they were forgotten. On the bridge of the Vigilant, Mara looked to Solace through the hollow feed. We've won this battle. Solace nodded, but not the war. Mara smiled faintly. Then let's start the next one. He returned her look, then turned back to the stars. Beyond them, in the dark corners of space, new lights were blinking. The past was returning. The grave was open, and Earth was no longer lost. It had become a storm. And the galaxy? The galaxy would never sleep again.